FM 107.5.
And we are live on our Facebook page because I want to capture this moment on video as well as for those listeners on radio. Nico, thank you so much for being in our studios this morning.
Thank you, Jonathan, and hi to the listeners.
So, Budget Speech 2019, the first budget speech that Tito Mboweni was able to do all by himself. As we know, last year it was literally he was handed information and he had to present that. This time he was the one working behind the scenes, obviously with a team, and he put together the budget. Very interesting things that came out of that, and that's why we've got you to help us understand.
Okay, his style is very different from any minister that we've had before. Clearly, it's a different style, and we've got to get used to that, because normally the Minister of Finance speaks for 2 hours. Now, our day starts very early in the morning, and we usually gather together 200 or 300 of us. These are people who are experts in various fields. And so as the speech starts, we get the written copy immediately so we can scan ahead. And this is why all my tweets went out long before he actually came to that sentence, because we have prior access.
Yeah.
But I noticed the speech was only 20 pages long.
Wow.
And within an hour he'd packed up and gone off. And we had assumed that he would speak for 2 hours. So the rest of the activities suddenly had to be brought forward. And I've never seen a kitchen full of staff rush that fast, because everything had to be brought forward so that we can get on with the rest of the agenda. But when he started yesterday, I set myself a goal. I want to see what's going to happen about corruption. I'm not interested in promises. I'm not interested in how much money you're going to save in 5 or 6 years' time. I'm not interested in how much government is going to reduce the cost. I want to know what you're going to do about corruption today. That was where my goal was. So he started off by quoting scripture. And he used the simile of South Africa being a farm and we're being farmers. And every year we plant seed, we water it, we tend it, we try and grow something. And then a rot or a pest comes in and robs us of our crop.
Sure.
He was very, very blunt where he was going to go with that particular budget speech. Now, I sat in a room where we had a floor-to-ceiling screen, and we were able to view the faces of the ministers and the parliamentarians. It was so big, I could see the Botox injections. And every now and then the camera was very naughty, because they then focused on the minister he was referring to indirectly.
Brilliant.
There were some absolutely classic looks, and I'll refer to one of them as we go along. Now, the first thing he said, and this is unusual to do it in this way, he said we've got to fix SARS. So he didn't start off about how much tax we're going to pay. We didn't start off with fancy stats. He said we have to fix SARS. And he then told us how he's going to fix SARS. So already he had my tick, because that was one of the issues I wanted to deal with. And a new commissioner is about to be announced. In the next 2 or 3 days, we will know who the new commissioner is. That's happening. I wanted to see that. Then he mentioned this new unit that is going to fight illicit cigarettes. And I want to explain why that's important, because the day before yesterday, a business person in Port Elizabeth had his house, cars confiscated. That business person is now homeless.
Wow.
And that business person had in excess of 20 million rand removed from his assets. This is a significant move. In addition to that, there are photographs doing around of a very prominent woman in KwaZulu who met with another big gang of illicit cigarette smugglers. And the rumors are that they funded her. They are next. He made that very clear. That's the next gang to go.
Yeah.
So the cigarette smugglers alone, that unit, should bring in about 7 billion rand over the next year.
7 billion.
Over the next year. So I think that's a great, great idea. Then the new large business unit is starting up again at SARS. Now the problem we have with a lot of this corruption, it takes years to collect the evidence, and it takes even longer to prove that that was the fruit of corruption. We don't have that kind of time. But with this new business unit, all we've got to say is you've got money in your account and you can't explain it, so we're charging you with tax evasion.
Oh, brilliant.
That's easy. We can throw you in jail within a year.
Yeah.
That unit does that. That's what it does. So again, pull the old Al Capone story on all of these politicians. Don't bother to try and argue whether it was your brother who actually earned the 1 million rand a month. You have it, you didn't declare it, you're going to jail.
Brilliant.
Simple, finished, out of that. Then we're going to massively change the IT system. So now whether you've started a family trust or try to smuggle money into the family trust so that it doesn't go into your name, with this new system, they can link you to the trust anyway. So once more, where did that 20 million come from? Where did that 30 million come from that you put into the Dubai family trust? They're going to be able to track it. They're going to be able to deal with it. So SARS is going to be fixed. There's going to be a new focus on cross-border violations, transfers. We're going to find out where those hundreds of millions of rand went, that certain family members who were related to the previous president, where they put the money. We're going to find out about it, and there's going to be action. So in that sense, it was great. Then he went to the traditional, we're going to pay, you're going to pay. The first thing is, provided you don't get a salary increase, you're not going to pay tax. So
or more tax.
That's the problem here.
Yeah.
So what is going to happen is he hasn't made allowances for inflation. So if your boss is increasing your tax to keep up with inflation, it may push you up into a new bracket.
If your boss is increasing your salary.
Yes.
Okay.
To keep up with inflation,
Yeah.
you probably, potentially, are going to move into a new bracket. You need to see if it's worth it. Because there are going to be times you're actually going to end up with less money.
Oh my.
So just check that calculation out carefully.
Yeah.
That is a sacrifice that we're all making. And I'll come back to that in a minute's time. The other thing I wanted to know is, what has government done about reducing its salary bill? Not what is it going to do, what has it done in the last 6 months? Well, it has cut the salary bill by just over 25 billion rand already.
Wow.
And there's more to come. It's also cut another 12 billion rand of pet projects. That has already happened. So that is another tick box for me. Then we get to Eskom. Now I want to clarify again, because although he said this twice, there's a certain leader of an opposition party who didn't get it. He is not giving Eskom money. Eskom is allowed to borrow money from us,
Okay.
23 billion a year for the next 3 years. They have to pay that money back, but there's a price tag. And the price tag is that we will appoint at board level a person called a restructuring officer. That appointment will be made by the Minister of Finance and the Minister of State-Owned Enterprises. It's not going to be appointed by Eskom.
Fantastic.
And that person's job is to restructure. No matter how much the unions make a noise, that restructuring has to happen.
Yeah.
And in future, any state-owned enterprise who wants money will only be allowed to have that money after the restructuring officer has taken their place on the board.
Fantastic.
And that restructure officer has very, very clear goals. In Eskom's case, we have suppliers set up by the Guptas who are charging horrendous prices for coal. Those contracts are going to be reviewed, and you are not going to be able to keep getting that kind of return on your money. There are certain renewable energy companies who set up with guaranteed contracts over 20 years at phenomenal prices, up to 4 times what they should have been paid. Those contracts are going up for renewal. If you're a beautician, as exists right now in KwaZulu-Natal, and you supply the diesel to Eskom at an horrendous price, guess what's going to happen to your contract?
Cancelled.
That's it. The same goes for the dentist who's making money as well. So the pain has got to be taken by the suppliers and the beneficiaries of Eskom. It's also got to be taken by Eskom staff. Yes, there's probably going to be 4,000 or 5,000 job cuts. But if we don't do that, no matter how much the unions scream and shout about jobs, there are going to be more than 4,000 or 5,000 other people losing their jobs if Eskom stays broken. So there are a whole lot of things that have to be done. The non-essential divisions have got to go, and Eskom can no longer provide 90% of our power. They're going to have to be independent producers who supply electricity to outside of Eskom. So that is going to create that particular issue. Cabinet is now discussing that in future nobody will be allowed to get more money from the state, no SOE, for operational costs. If your problem is that bad, a complete restructure is going to have to happen, not a bailout. That rule is now being discussed. Once it's implemented, that is going to make a change. At this point, government workers have to say goodbye to overtime. The national government has to cut another 27 billion rand off their budget. Provincial governments have got to cut money off their budgets. And then the scene that I absolutely loved. He announced that the diplomats will not get a salary increase. Not only that, they're going to have to cut their budgets. And at that point, they scanned the face of the minister who was affected by this. I promise you, I was so glad I could not read her mind. It was not a friendly and a happy look. In addition to that, no member of parliament or member of a provincial is going to get a salary increase in the next month.
Okay.
In the next year.
Wow.
They're saying it's not only taxpayers who've got to take it, everybody else. And I think that's about what we've got time for right now. So for far as where I'm concerned, I'm happy about yesterday's budget. I'm glad I don't have any uncles or aunts who work for government, because they're not going to be happy. But it's nonsense that the taxpayers take the pain every time.
And what's worse for me is that the poorest of the poor have been suffering for so long as well.
Absolutely, and he's being very clear. He's saying we borrow 1.2 billion a day, and our interest payments per day is 1 billion. This is nonsense. He made that very clear to government. He said, this is nonsense. This is not sustainable. And we can't keep squeezing the taxpayer to make this up. So we are going to make the cuts.
Fantastic.
I like that.
I like that too. Nico, as always, a breath of fresh air, a fantastic, clear perspective. We really do appreciate your insight. And thank you for coming through to our studios this morning.
Thank you.
And ladies and gentlemen, it is on our Facebook